Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Deep Edge Podcast. I'm your host, Ray Moda, and today we're going to dive deep into the intersection of AI and global networking. We're going to have a special guest from Arelion, who's a visionary industry, and he's going to unpack some of the things related to an important topic of what I call the intersection of how we look at global networks and the impact AI is going to have related to bandwidth, reliability, resiliency, and scalability, and then how to address some of the bandwidth of the needs for NX 400G related to manage optical networks and dark fiber, and then looking at how do we redefine the AI data center highway without ignoring the need for reliability, especially as we look at some of these AI use cases, which some of these workloads really can't rely or can't have any interruption because they're becoming very critical to some of these business continuities. And then we're going to venture off into some of the future outlooks of some of the challenges related to distributed data centers and edge computing. So let's get into this insightful conversation and let's get deep into it. Hi, Mattias. Welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Hey, I'm fine, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to be able to join the podcast today. Now, where are you located these days before we get started there?
Yeah, no, I'm actually in the headquarters in Stockholm, Sweden, so quite far away from where you are. So
Okay, so you're trying to stay warm basically, right?
absolutely, it's quite cold here still. So
All right. Well, maybe we can start off with for a lot of our audience that aren't as familiar with your role in Aurelion, do you mind
mm.
getting into that discussion first, and then we'll get started with some of the questions there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. My role here is I'm part of the management team, and I'm also the chief evangelist at Arelion. And Arelion is a global carrier, you could say. We serve the largest content providers and the largest internet service providers, mobile operators, making sure that everyone has a good connection to the internet. So we run the largest internet backbone in the world. And then, of course, on top of that network, we can sell services directly to enterprises, when they need to connect their global vans or whatever they need to connect in terms of cloud services and other applications everywhere. That's what we try to do. So we're the backbone of many things, I could say.
Yeah, no, it becomes an important part because some people take it for granted. They just assume things work, right? So it's good to clarify that. Now, Johan Otterson, I think, wrote a blog that was interesting, and it kind of sparked my interest for this call, right? And part of it was related to different pieces associated with the global networks and AI. Maybe we can start off with when we look at AI, right? It's becoming kind of like this data beats, right? Um,
Yep.
how are global networks keeping up with this insane appetite for bandwidth and speed when it comes to training and these massive models, and when you look at how they're using inferences?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question and something we discuss here every day, really, how to keep up with this. Obviously, over time, our interest has always been to have a lower cost per megabit of production costs every day going forward. We need to keep up with the pace. There is a constant traffic growth in the network. We had about a 42% traffic growth last year in 2024. So traffic growth is not new to us. But the scary thing with AI is it could be a lot more traffic. Obviously, more traffic is good because we live on traffic growth, but the AI could be, we haven't really seen so much so far in the backbone, but over time, there will be a lot. Most of the AI stuff is done in data centers right now, but AI has the possibility of connecting a lot of data centers with a lot of traffic. And then this enormous burst will be in terms of traffic that we all need to cohere to. And yeah, currently we're working and trying to figure out where are the AI data centers going to be located, where do we find them, how do we connect them. There's a lot of work around this, but of course the potential in terms of traffic is just tremendous here. So we just all need to be ready.
Yeah, no, and I think it's better to be ready, especially when you start looking as soon as some of these AI models start building some of these video type AI, just transferring across the board is going to be a potential increase. There is debate about whether you can do that with metadata, but we'll see where that goes. Now, the interesting part of that, when you talked about data center and stuff like this, there's kind of like this network face-off that I'm calling when we see, hyperscalers, they're building these massive data centers, and it seems like enterprises are kind of like scrambling to upgrade the network. What are the key differences in how these tech giants are approaching networking for AI compared to more traditional businesses?
Yeah, no, I really think that the sort of hyperscalers, as we can call them, I really think they know that this is going to be a tremendous amount of traffic. I think everyone else is sort of predicting it's going to be, but the hyperscalers, they really know. So they will build these data centers. And the funny thing is, previously they bought data centers where we had cables. They asked us, where do you have fiber available? And then that's where many of the data centers were built. This time around, it's not about where there is fiber at all, because these are so power hungry places. So they need to look for power first. I asked one of them and he said, power is priority number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then fiber is number 6. If they have available power, they will build a data center there. And then companies like us have to come there to pick it up. And I think that's the main difference from last time. Last time around when they built it for cloud services, it was a combination of power and connectivity. This time it's power only. And then the amount of data they're building for and the amount of megawatt they're going to consume and the amount of traffic they need in and out of these data centers are so much more than the normal business. So normal business week, they can't sit back in the boat and wait, but they don't have the amount of traffic that the hyperscalers have. So they're not in urgency to build these data centers. While the hyperscaler, they have an urgency right now because it's happening as we speak. They just need to build. If you ask them if they want to have 10 more data centers, they will say we need 50.
Right.
And that's just madness. So I think the sheer volume of traffic is really what separates them from the average business. The average business need more connectivity for their AI applications, but they don't have even thousands of the data packets that the hyperscalers have in this case.
Yeah, no, I love your example 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 because it's spot on. I think in that area. Now, as we look at more of this next gen connectivity, right? When we look at some of the bandwidth from that side of it, we're hearing a lot of buzz of NX400G, managed opticals, and even dark fiber. How are some of these cutting edge technologies changing the game and handling some of these massive data flows that AI generates?
Yeah, no, I think without the optical innovations and everything we see from the suppliers, we wouldn't be anywhere near close to satisfy the needs of these hyperscalers. So of course, the way that we worked the last couple of years in the whole industry by separating the line systems from the transponders and also makes networks more flexible. It makes easier for us to build more networks and so on. So I think there's a lot of innovation going into how we build networks. And that is, of course, very important to take on all these capacity and so on. And then at the same time, we have in the industry reached what's sort of called the Shannon's limit, which means that the amount of traffic you can send through a fiber pair is practically reached, which means that data centers, if they want to have even more traffic, they need to go for the second fiber pair and the third fiber pair and the fourth fiber pair. And that's why all these N times 400 or N times 800 gig waves are so important for them. They can't just get enough from one fiber pair. They need more fiber pairs. And that's the fact that we're all living in right now. And that's complicates life in some way, because earlier you could just rip out the old system, replace it with a new system, and the new system was 10 times better than the old system, and you were perfectly fine. Now you need to build the next system next to the first system, and then you need to keep up generations of systems. And yeah, life is a bit more complicated these days. But of course, the optical innovation and what happens on the market is good for all of us. And that's what saves us in these times.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, when you talk about, high capacity, stuff like this, but one of the things I think to add to that is, resiliency, right? Network, because you could have the bigger pipe, but you need super level resiliency, specifically for certain AI workloads, right? They're becoming more and more critical to part of businesses, organization, and they can't afford kind of some of these interruptions. When we look at building this, I guess, super resiliency, how do you handle this unpredictability demand for AI while trying to maintain network resiliency?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and it's a complicated thing. I think in the past, companies were happy if they had two routes between A and B. Now, most of them wants four routes between A and B, and also the fact that everyone have so much higher demand on every route right now. In the past, if we had a flap of a couple of milliseconds, outages and so on, no one really cared because if everything that goes through is streaming video and emails and phone and things like that, the network will recover that. But what I hear now is that the demand on the network is so much tougher and everything needs to be up and running 100.00%. It's not like 99 point whatever nines. That's not good enough. And that's put a lot of strain on the network. So what we're working on right now is trying to figure out how we can build even more routes between certain locations. If you want to cross US from New York to Los Angeles, yeah, two routes in the past were good. If you don't have four routes today, yeah, you might not even be considered by some of these companies buying these services. And then, of course, it becomes even more important to know that you have 100% diversity. In the past, you could buy, we buy this route from this company, you buy another route from another company, and a third route from a third company, finding out a year later that everything goes in the same cable between Austin and Dallas. Those type of things we need to be extra careful about right now, really finding out exactly where the traffic is going so we can 100% guarantee that one outage is not going to take out at least two routes or even three routes. So there is a lot of more things we need to work on to handle this traffic that we didn't really need to work on 5 years ago. So a lot of things are becoming tougher.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's what keeps us in business, right? So it's so complexity breeds a need for a necessity, and then traffic growth helps validate some of this, but more than just opening up a bigger pipe, having something that's reliable right now. As we look at, kind of like what we call this modern AI applications, right, becoming more and more critical. The traditional way of building these networks is kind of like evolving, right? From your experience, since you work, in your large provider in this space, how do you see the adoption to support in kind of like this distributed data center and edge computing mode when we look at AI's distributed need across the board and driving traffic?
Yeah, no, that's an important question, and I think both scalability and flexibility will be more and more important. And we realize that we need to work with more partners. Our network alone can't take all of this. If we need to be further out to the edge, we need to be in more locations. No one can afford to build their own networks to everywhere. So we need to work with partners. We need to find regional players who can help us take traffic to various places. We need to work with maybe utility companies who can provide fibers to us so we can do this. I think the full ecosystem is just going to be more important. The companies that could do it all before, the Verizons and the AT&Ts and the big ones, no one can do that anymore. Now everyone needs to work with everyone. So that's, of course, putting a lot of pressure on us as a company. We need to work with our suppliers in a much better way. We need to make sure our network goes over their network without interruptions and without customers calling us and we don't know what happened because it's in someone else's network. So there's going to be a lot more pressure on operators like us to be in many more places, and then we need to work with many more companies in order to cope with the traffic and be there on time.
Yeah, that's a challenge, right? You can't do it alone. You need an equal partnership while still maintaining that level of credibility of that service across the board, which
Absolutely.
which I think is important. Maybe, one thing, Mattias, is you're a big thinker in future type thought leadership. And maybe we can close with where if you kind of open up your crystal ball, right, is what are some of the biggest challenges that you see, but also what is the most exciting opportunities that you see for network backbone providers as we look at AI continue to drive this need and reshape the way we think about business and designing networks?
Yeah, no, in terms of traffic, it's just going to grow, and that's fine. That we love that.
Yeah.
But we also see a fantastic opportunity, as you say, in terms of using AI ourselves. Everyone in our industry is still very manual. We all need to be much more automated. Obviously, automation depends on that we trust our own data. That's an issue for every telecom operator. You know, do you trust your own data to make a machine make decisions on the data you have, or do you want to have a person look at it before? That's one thing we work on right now, and that's where I think AI can help us a lot more to make sure that the data we take decisions on are trustworthy. Because our dream is, of course, that the visibility of our network becomes a lot better. That, you know, whenever a customer is calling us, we already know what happened, and we can tell them immediately, you know, this is the case, this is what happened, and this is the likelihood of us fixing this in this time, and so on. And these are the things we're going to do. That's one area where we're working very hard right now on trying to get that visibility up, both for ourselves and for our customers, so that we don't need to sit in phone calls trying to explain something we don't really know if it's true or not.
Right.
The other thing is, of course, the predictability of repairing things. You know, if a number of parameters at the same times are met, then the likelihood of that card failing within the next 3 days is high.
Right.
Let's swap that card then and make sure that it doesn't fail at all. Those are the type of dream scenarios that we can really see that AI will help us with. Before, you know, yeah, everyone had these sort of tiny models of trying to figure out this. I think AI is going to help us tremendously around how we communicate with our customers and how their experience of our services are going to be. AI can read through thousands of emails immediately, while a person can only do that in hours and days. And that's sort of, if everyone asks the same thing, you know, that's maybe something has happened and we need to figure out. So I think AI will be fantastic for telecom operators. It will be fantastic for every company, hopefully. But for telecom in general, who have been famous for being very manual, I think all of us have a way to go to be automated, and AI will help us on the way.
Yeah, no, this is a good way to end, because I tend to be a technology optimist there. So yeah, so I was looking forward to it. Now, Mattias, thanks for joining the podcast with Mattias. This is Ray Moda. Thanks for joining this edition of the Deep Edge podcast.
Thank you.